Andy, as I think about our podcast and how far we've come in these 2 months that we've been doing this, I still think that we're lacking a little something. And I was looking for inspiration. And look, this isn't a hit on anybody or any type of podcast. This is not about any sort of political leaning or anything like that, or I support anybody. But Joe Rogan had Elon Musk on
Yeah.
earlier. I don't know if it was yesterday or earlier this week. And the big gimmick on that was he shot a bow and arrow at a Tesla truck.
Yeah.
So, Andy, I think we have quite a game. And like Joe Rogan is one of the most, I think if he's not the top one, he's within the top five of podcasts. So, Andy, I think we have a lot of road to go still as we grow this podcast.
Because we're not blowing up vehicles. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
a 2012, car outside my house. We can probably take some shots of that if you want to do something dynamic on camera. I mean,
We could, I mean, maybe we could do a slingshot or so. I could take a Nerf gun at it and maybe see what happens there.
let's go. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So Andy, we've got some aspirations to get to as we grow and we'll get there. Andy, I want to start with our sports check-in. We've got a lot of sports news this week.
There's a lot.
A lot of things going on, but I do want to congratulate you, Andy. On our last podcast, we were talking about the Lions embarrassing the Las Vegas Raiders, and you went on a little bit of a rant about Josh McDaniels, and you must have some sort of, he must have like looked the other way at you in the hallway one time because you had quite a beef with him. And I had mentioned he'd been there for a couple of years, and you said he's not going to be there much longer. And sure enough, Andy, Nostradamus again. Josh McDaniels is gone. How are you feeling? How does that feel?
So, Dave, if I could first, let me take a step back. And I mentioned
Okay.
my Lions hat collection to you, and I want to welcome you to November with one of my favorite Lions hats. This my oldest son got this one for me. I love it. It's as fellow veterans here, I want to acknowledge the NFL does a great job celebrating veterans in November. So this day, Dave, I wear this hat to honor you and thank you for your service. So that starters two. The Lions didn't embarrass the Raiders. The Raiders embarrassed themselves. I mean, that team just sucks, as we've discussed at length here. So, listen, I always feel bad, right? When it comes to professional coaches, right? Professional athletes, like we talk about them like they genuinely suck, right? There's 32 NFL head coaches,
Yeah.
right? You are elite at what you do if you were in that job. So no personal gripe with Josh McDaniels. And he's probably, I mean, percentage wise of coaching, like the guy's got to be a good coach, right? He's been coaching the NFL for a long time. He's got more Super Bowl rings than I've got rings. Period. He's been successful. That being said, if you screw up in the NFL, you get called out because you're supposed to be the very best at what you do, and some guys just simply aren't as good as others. Josh McDaniels, in comparison to other coaches, he sucks. And his firing, the GM's firing, Jimmy Garoppolo's benching, none of that is surprising when you've got a team that's just looking as horrific as they have. So, at a personal level, sorry to see a guy go through that. It's tough, but he's the first of several that are going to fall this year, right? That's just the way the NFL goes.
Yeah.
So sorry, Josh. He'll probably end up back in New England like every other New England coach that fails and ends up back in Belichick's loving embrace. So we'll see what happens to him. But he wasn't a good coach the first time. He wasn't a good coach the second time. I think his head coaching days are done.
Yeah, I think this just goes back to my belief. Like certain people are good offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, linebacker coaches, whatever. That doesn't mean they're going to be a good head coach. And just because, again, somebody like Bill Belichick is who he is, I mean, he can master all those elements and bring it all together and weigh in where he needs to as a head coach. You can't go and be Bill Belichick in another place just because you learned under him. And I think that's where these coaches fail so often is they try to be somebody else. And I think that's just where, they go and say, hey, it worked for Bill in New England, so therefore it's going to be work for me in Denver and Las Vegas. And I agree. He's probably never going to get a chance because remember, I mean, he had all effectively was in line to get the Indianapolis job, and then he pulled out at the last minute and you get what you get. So
Yeah.
so that's one piece, Andy. We had the Texas Rangers won the World Series, their first World Series. I mean, I feel a little connection just to Texas only because they used to be the Washington Senators, much like the Minnesota Twins used to be the Washington Senators, and now we have the Washington Nationals. And as a growing up in Virginia back in the day, we only had the Baltimore Orioles, who you can see my Orioles shirt on. I'm a proud supporter, but it was sad that the Washington Nationals Washington didn't have a team for so long, but happy for the Texas Rangers. I think viewership was down, Andy, but I think it was good overall for baseball. They had a lot of good rule changes this year. So I know you're not an avid follower, Andy, but I thought it was pretty good for them. So
Yeah, so congratulations, Texas Rangers and the great nation of Texas on their victory. Texas wins something every now and again, right? It's just like it's what happens in the state there. So good for the Rangers, better than the Cowboys.
yeah, I was gonna say just not the Cowboys for 35 years or whatever it's been
But
at
you
this
guys have a great former coach that's an excellent coordinator now, right? Dan Quinn, who I think was a pretty good head coach, to be honest. Another guy showed up that was, I mean, he's a fantastic defensive coordinator for the Cowboys today, right? I mean, he's just killing it. And I always laugh when I see him standing in the booth with his hat backwards, right? Because he reminds me of a
Yeah.
little whenever I see him. But and another example of a guy that is killing it in one role and maybe not as strong in another.
Yeah, I mean, you're just making my point, Andy. I'm just making me feel a lot better here. All right, Andy, other sports hits I want to get into. James Harden for the NBA was traded from Philadelphia to the Los Angeles Clippers. This now makes James Harden. He's demanded a trade 4 times. I mean, he demands trades and then just decides to pout and sit out. And this is a guy who hasn't. I mean, he's been an MVP. He's been really good individually, but has never been able to win anything outside of that. Yet somehow we've paid him millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and we continue to appease that. Yeah, I think there's been an interesting part with sports. For so long, the owners dominated the players.
Yeah.
And then, you get into the 60s, 70s, you start getting free agency. And it's hard to believe, but free agency, as common as it is now, was not very common even
Yeah.
into the 80s and early 90s, Andy. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, that early run for the Cowboys was largely built because they drafted really well and they were able to keep their players. They didn't lose players through free agency. That's not the case anymore. I think that's partially why they struggle so much. But we have this player empowerment era where, for some reason, players feel like they can demand a trade after signing a contract within a year. They signed these huge contracts. I think it's largely in basketball more so than the other sports, but I think it's good that the players feel empowered to be able to push back and demand certain things. It's just like unions and such like that. I think they have to be able to stand up for themselves. At some point, it gets a little ridiculous, though. So I'm not sure what your take on that is, Andy, as well. So
Yeah, I think a lot of the free agency, came together, while we were growing up, really, right? And it did change sports and the dynamic between teams and owners and sort of sports loyalty. You buy a jersey and that guy's with your team forever. It did change, but I think it changed it in a good way. I think you're right. I think it was a positive overall change, and it's exciting. And free agency is always fun, and so I appreciate that. But I think you're right. I think, and you see this in football too. I think where when you're in free agency, go do whatever you want. You want to hold out for the big contract. Like, I mean, again, I think like no problem with that. Get that multi-million-dollar, $100 million contract if you can demand that kind of pay. But once you've signed it, like that's where I get frustrated because I think you're really hurting the sport. You're hurting your team. Like you signed the contract. You can't just sit on the bench now and pout because you don't like the coach, you're not getting enough playing time. You want more money because somebody else got more money. Like that's not how it works, right? So, I mean, it is how it works, unfortunately. But candidly speaking, it's like you made an agreement. You got to execute that agreement now. Like when your time's up and it's free agency time again, go do whatever you want, right? But while you're in the contract that you signed, go out there and play. That's what you've agreed to do. And at the end of the day, look, you're playing a professional sport. You're making millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to play a professional sport. It's great. Enjoy it. Do what you said you were going to do, and then go do whatever you want after. I really hate to see guys, quit mid-season and pout and refuse to play. Now, it's one thing if it's a protest type event, but just for more money because they're mad with the coaching, like that's not how it works. But you got to do your job. So I hate to see that, to be honest. And James Harden, I think he just wants to play for every team in the NBA. That's ultimately his goal, I think. So we'll see where he ends up. But
he's getting there. I think it's like 5 or 6 teams at this point. So yeah, and I think the striking comparison is football. I mean, look on the opposite side; those are not fully guaranteed contracts like baseball, hockey, and basketball is. Those are all fully guaranteed contracts. In football, you're not. I mean, you have some people like look at Jonathan Taylor for the Colts this year. I mean, he's like, I went out. I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play. And they're like, and he wants to trade. He wants more money. And they basically said, hey, go have at it. See what you can get out there.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, he's back in the lineup. And sure enough, that's where you go. I mean, it is interesting to see how these things, I don't know, as much as we've swung the pendulum, went from, owners to players. I think we've got to find a sweet spot here where people, you sign a contract, you play to that contract and you work through it. So, all right, Andy, I don't want to spend too much more time on that, but I do want to, like, this will lead to a larger discussion here, Andy. Yesterday we learned Bobby Knight, the legendary coach from Indiana, he also coached at Texas Tech. Died yesterday. I don't think I saw the cause of death or anything, but he was at 83 years old or early 80s. It's hard to believe because he was such an icon in our youth, the 80s, 90s basketball, with Indiana winning multiple national championships and did well at Texas Tech as well. But he also came with a little bit of little controversy. Obviously, he was very hot tempered, widely known for his engagements with reporters, his engagements with players and the other teams, and his antics of on the court behavior. In the 80s, that was a little bit more commonly accepted. The coaches almighty and all powerful.
Yeah.
That obviously would no longer be acceptable, and that fact that led to his ousting at Indiana ultimately. But these coaches, in a lot of respects, as former players will die, stand side by side with him and say he was a great, molder of men, and he did so much for me. And I'm sure there's a lot to that. But there's the other side of those players who were not maybe the star player, who were abused and were, felt belittled or whatnot. So I think it comes a very challenging time. I think it really speaks to kind of the power and impact of coaching. I know you've talked about this, or you've referenced this a couple times in our previous pods. How, what's your thoughts on Bobby Knight passing? And then what are your thoughts on, the impact of coaching?
Yeah, so I love the topic, Dave. So first, with Bobby Knight, I mean, I didn't closely watch, and know all the characters in college basketball growing up, but there were some things I definitely did know growing up in the DC area. I was, a big Georgetown Hoyas fan, and there were probably three coaches I think everybody kind of knew at that time, even if you didn't really know college basketball. And that was one, Georgetown's John Thompson. You knew Coach K down at Duke, who was, killing it for decades upon decades. And you knew Bobby Knight, right? And his, picking up chairs and his antics on the court, and just a very colorful character, right? And at a legendary basketball school. And so, it's sad to see him go. It seems like, I think we've done, like we've probably talked about some, icon of our youth passing on half of these podcasts now. And it's just kind of, it's sad to see that happen. But hey, 83. I remember Bobby Knight always looking 83. I mean, I think he was.
That's the part of it, right?
But he lived a good life, had great success. 83 years old. Seems like he died peacefully and naturally. So rest in peace, Bobby Knight, and thoughts to him and his family. And good job, good life. He lived a good life. On coaching, Dave, this is a really sweet topic to me. I think I mentioned before, I played high school football. I started my junior year, right? And I didn't play before then. And I think the impact of good coaches and the impact of bad coaches and teachers, right, is really underappreciated, right? And the role that those, women and men play in the lives of the kids that they're educating and mentoring and developing can be huge for the positive and negative. So, without trying to go too long, I'll put two contrasting examples, right? So on the coaching side, I came into football and I had a defensive line coach with new coaching regime when I got there. And my defensive line coach just was a fantastic guy in my life at that time, and just played a role in mentoring me and developing me and caring about me as a player. And that went on to continue. He helped develop me in powerlifting, and we trained together, and he taught me a lot, and he motivated me a lot. We went to competitions together later. just really helped me transition to the guy that I was becoming. As you go through those high school years and a kid's trying to find who they are and find their path. And he really helped me figure out who I was, not purposely, right? He wasn't seeking, I don't think, to make me something or do something with me. He just invested his time and his coaching efforts into me, as a good coach does. And it's a profound effect, I think, on getting me down a path of positivity. And likewise, my head coach was, to me, a really good guy. He was fun. He worked hard for the team. And when we were doing our sort of end of year awards that junior year, my first year playing ball, he said some really kind, encouraging words for me as I was being recognized with my varsity letters. All the varsity players were, and just taking the time to have those positive words and praise and encouragement, again, really helped solidify me down a path to I think the person I am today, right? From the kid that I was entering high school, which was a different kid than I was by my junior year. And that's, it's a whole nother story, but really got me down the path to the person that I am still today, right? I credit football and ROTC and the Army in shaping me in that sense. And those coaches played an absolutely huge role in my life and had a huge impact on me. And I don't think they ever knew that. I mean, I don't think they knew how impactful they were, but absolutely, to me, phenomenal, right? In what they did. So that's a great, I think, testament to the character of good coaches and teachers. On the flip side, just to say it, because it can also be really negative, right? And I had a teacher my senior year, a government teacher, who I genuinely liked the guy. I thought he was a fun teacher, a nice guy. I enjoyed his class. I loved government classes. And at that time, I thought I wanted to pursue a career in education and become a government teacher myself, right? So I not only appreciate his class, but I also saw him as like, hey, I can see myself in this guy's shoes, in a few years' time. And as a young kid, I think I was 16 years old, I think at the time. I graduated when I was 17, so I think I was around 16 years old, and had a presentation, right? And you don't know anything at that age, right? And I had a presentation, I gave a presentation, and it hit a political nerve for the guy, right? And yeah, I didn't even know what I was talking about, right? I was just sort of having fun with the presentation. And he pulled me and one of my classmates aside after the class and like berated us for our I think he used the term right-wing conservative political beliefs, right? And I didn't even know what half that meant, right? He was just going off on me. And I was in shell shock, right? I was like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? And I felt small. I felt bad. I was confused. I really didn't know what just happened. This guy's berated me. I didn't understand it. At that point, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be a government teacher. Fuck that. It really hurt me in a negative way. And again, I don't know what it was that day. He got triggered, whatever it was. But when you berate a kid, right, or otherwise mistreat them as an adult and as an adult of influence, that can also have a much larger impact than one might think because of how young and influential you are at that age. So, to that unnamed teacher, fuck you very much, right? But I think it's really a testament to the power and impact of good and bad coaches, teachers, and other significant mentors in our lives. So to my coaches, and God bless you, thank you, and I love you and appreciate you. And to that teacher, he's probably a really nice guy, but that day really made a bad choice in how he treated me and my classmate. And again, I mean, to this day, I can remember the feeling I had as he went off on me, and it still pisses me off. So sorry, long aside, but great topic.
No, it's good to get your history, your background, and anytime you can drop a couple F-bombs, Andy, I think that's a good thing. And so, no, I think you hit on so many good points there, Andy. I think it's, as young kids growing up, I think we just fail to, and again, I'm not going to make this just a blanket statement. Everybody in the community, like we just, kids are so impressionable, and they want to look up to adults in so many different ways. And if you're a coach, a youth coach, yes, I get in today's culture, everybody wants to win, and all they want to do is play on the best teams and do the best things. We lose something when that's our only focus. And if we're not teaching those right life lessons and helping mold those kids about playing, sports for the right reasons. Look, if 1% of all the kids playing sports today make any sort of money off of professional sports, it may be that small number. I mean, there are so many other people who are playing for the enjoyment, who are playing for the camaraderie, who are playing to have those lifelong memories. And if we're not doing it, for those reasons. And if we're not coaching to that kid just as much as we are coaching to the kid who is going to play professional sports, that's where we really can have a detrimental impact. And I would argue, Andy, I mean, I used to coach travel baseball for my oldest son, and then for 3 or 4 years or whatever. It was a great experience. And look, I'm not going to say I was a saint all the time on the sideline and in my engagements there, but I think me and my coaches, we tried to facilitate and foster that, enjoyment of the game. And we felt, even though that we may not have been as talented as any of the kids, we were going to teach the sport the right way and teach the game to be played the right way. And I think we wound up very successful. But I think a lot of these days, there's a lot of ulterior motives. A lot of people want to make as much money as they can off of certain things. And that gets into a whole nother youth sports dynamic that I don't think we have time for today, Andy. So yeah, just interesting to see Bobby Knight leave in that conflicted legacy. I mean, a lot of it is going to be a very positive. He did a lot of great things for the sport. But there's also going to be those times where within the lead paragraph or within the first montage of video is going to be Bobby Knight throwing a chair across the thing. And so I think that's what we have to live with. But I think if any coaches are out there listening, you have a lot of valuable impact to the 12th man on the roster as much as you do the first man on the roster. So Andy, I want to just wrap that up there. Another thing happened this week, Andy, and you, again, we have our own work lives. This is not a work podcast, but as part of your work life, something intriguing did happen this week, and you called to speak out against it. I think you posted it on Threads. You posted it out on your Twitter or your LinkedIn site. Do you want to give a little quick background on that, Andy? I don't know if we have a ton of time to dig into it, but I do think it's interesting to want to call that out.
So what I'll do, I won't dive into this, specifically. If somebody's really, curious, you can check out, the LinkedIn or Threads or whatever and see the video. I'll say this, I think there's a lot of people in today's internet culture, influencer culture, that seek any means they can to have influence, and in many cases that means notoriety. And how far can I push people to pay attention to me? And they're screaming, pay attention to me. And so in this instance, an individual, sort of an alt-right edgelord kind of guy, made some really, really reckless comments, which in essence were directly encouraging violence upon a charitable organization. And it was so reckless, right? And I don't get fired up a lot, to be honest. I don't, except when I'm talking about my high school teacher, I guess, right? But I don't get fired up a lot or compelled to say something, right? But in this case, in our professional lives, David, you and I deal with a lot of things, and a lot of that is focused on trying to keep people safe. And this guy just made these really inflammatory, reckless, dangerous remarks. And I just hate to see people use any means available to boost their own name and fame at the expense potentially of causing harm to others. And that's, I mean, the reality is this guy made a threat and was inciting violence aimed at a specific group of people. That's bullshit, right? That's bullshit. And so really pissed me off. I did feel most week. I'll share the link in the show notes, the Medium post that accompanies this podcast when you want to check it out. But it just really pissed me off. And I think it's just such a misuse of positions and platforms and opportunities to speak in front of people. So really, again, the guy, maybe he was a remark he hadn't planned. It came off badly. I don't know. I'm not judging the guy, but judging his words and actions. Really terrible choice, really piss poor choice, really awful to see. And I hate to see people use, again, any means necessary to boost their own name recognition and notoriety in that sense. When it becomes dangerous, is just a horrible way to do it. So I was a little frustrated by it, Dave.
Yeah, and we will share all that stuff. And again, we don't want to get into all the details here, but again, it is one of those things where I think in this culture today, this heavily influenced culture environment, where people do hang on every one of these words, and people are going for the sound bites and looking for those clicks and looking for the follows. And oh my God, if I get 1,000 followers, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I saw at the end of the baseball season that I follow. They're like, my goal was to get 50,000 followers by the end of X period of time. And I'm like, for what? I mean, what's your purpose of getting
Yeah.
all the? I mean, what are you doing it for? Are you doing it because you love it? Or are you doing it for the follows? Are you doing it for the people?
Yeah.
It just is really frustrating. And to see somebody in this position advocate what they were advocating for. Look, most people are going to be able to discern, and we've talked about this on our professional podcast, Andy. That so I don't, go to gate15.global to see that kind of stuff. And go to the Gate 15 channel for podcasts if you want to get all of it. But most people are going to be able to discern, hey, this guy's a little bit loony, off the edge, but there are people out there that are going to hang on those words,
Yeah.
and they're going to say, you know what, he's right.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do something about it, and that's where we get in the wrong. I mean, I see too many people, getting, and we're gonna have to shelf this. We wanted to get into a little bit of the influencer talk, Andy, but we'll have to shelf that for next week or at another time. But I did want to give you that platform to talk about it, because I do think it, while it is a work related matter, it's also a personal issue. I think it does speak to some of our cultural stuff these days.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we'll get into some of that. So, Andy, let's wrap up here for this week. Anything on the docket? New Music Friday? What's going on here?
Dave, we'll see. I always like to just kind of wait and see what comes out on Friday. So last week
Yep.
was disappointing, to be honest. Nothing really caught my attention and got me excited. So it's something you got to find something different to listen to. So yesterday, as I was working out, we were talking working out on our last pod, and I put on I have a heavy, we're talking metal, right? I have a like old school metal playlist, and I put that on. And then an old Anthrax song came on. I was like, oh man, I forgot how much I love that album. And then I went back to that album and I was like, oh my gosh, I really forgot how much I love that album. So I was enjoying some good Anthrax blasting in my garage yesterday. I'll share two things, Dave, with that. So one, thanks to my neighbors again. I was thanking them on Tuesday's podcast. And as the trick-or-treaters were coming out, I was still finishing up my workout for those early birds that came out. So thanks to the neighbors that put up with me in the middle of a workout, grunting, groaning, throwing dumbbells in my little booty shorts as they were asking for candy. So that's one. And then two, Dave, we spoke about my booty shorts in the last podcast. And as I was working out yesterday, my loving wife came out and she took a picture to share. And I wanted to share this that everybody could fully appreciate. That's doing some shoulder presses there. And I was just, enjoying the,
you gotta see the crotch shot. Thanks, Andy. I really appreciate that view there.
I'm here to give you what I'm here to give America what America wants, Dave. And my shorts and my balls slightly falling out of my shorts are, I think, what the people really want. So I think that's
he's got old man balls. Who's that from? Was a Big Daddy when Adam Sandler's girlfriend went with the old man? Who it was funny. So, Andy, on that great note, as you're wearing your Metallica shirt, I would do want to call that out. You're in your heavy metal, so good kudos to you there. But Andy, let's wrap that up on the appropriate time here. And I hope you have a great weekend, Andy, and we'll catch up with you next week then.
That sounds great. Thanks, Dave.